Okay, good evening, everyone. We could already mention a good Erev Shabbos. I left my list. That wasn't smart. We are sponsored by Mark Franco for the safety, security, and atzlacha of the IDF. We are sponsored by Yisrael Fisher. Is Yisrael on yet? No. Sponsored by Yisrael Fisher, and we are sponsored by Dr. Block. Dr. Block, Le'ilui Nishmas, your uncle, what's his name?
Mordechai ben Yisrael.
Mordechai ben Yisrael. His neshama should have an aliyah. We learn, as always, to be mekayim the mitzvah of dibarta bam, la'asais nachas ruach liyitzreinu, and we are holding by Michtei, 2 lines from the bottom of Daf Beis Amid Beis.
Go off for a few minutes. I'm sorry.
Okay, we're gonna bated breath, Barry. Beis Amid Beis, 2 lines from the bottom. So we said that one teaching was like Rabbi Yehuda and one was like the Rabbanan. And Rabbi Yehuda says that if you Bezdin makes an erroneous decision and only an individual follows, that individual is still potter. The Chacham say if Bezdin makes an erroneous decision and an individual follows, he's chayiv until it's the majority of Klal Yisrael. So we said one teaching was Rabbi Yehuda and one teaching was the Rabbanan. So the question is, okay, there's 2 opinions, but how do you know which one is the Rabbanan and which one is Rabbi Yehuda? Michtei travayu stomei tanan. They're both anonymous. Memai de kemaisa Rabbi Yehuda. How do we know that the original one is Rabbi Yehuda or batraisa Rabbanan? Ema ibcha. How do you know to assign the names to the different opinions? Says the Gemara, well, if you remember, we said that Rabbi Yehuda says he's potter because it says in the pasuk, nefesh achas, mei am ha'oretz, it says 3 miyutim. And the Gemara says, who is the one that darshans so many miyutim in psukim? Says the Gemara, man shematle de dorish miute ki gavna, the darshans such limitations. Rabbi Yehuda, the Tanan, Rabbi Yehuda says by leprosy, zois tayras ha'oila, excuse me, Rabbi Yehuda, not leprosy, Rabbi Yehuda says by karbanas, it says zois tayras ha'oila, he ha'oila al moikta, and he says, hari elu shloishim miyutim. Zois is a miyut, he is a miyut, and ha'oila is a miyut. So therefore it's Rabbi Yehuda that has this kind of style of darshaning many miyutim. V'hiba yisayim, another proof, adayin ani aimar, that which it says, I still say, loy matzis mukmis lak Rabbi Yehuda. It makes a statement that adayin ani aimar, I still say that the Bezdin brings a carbon when the majority of the tzibur sins, and that can't be Rabbi Yehuda. The Ketani Rav Kol Shechatu, here he teaches that the majority, this teaching teaches that the majority of the Kol that sins, Mivian al Yedei Ampar, the Bezdin brings because of them a par, that's not Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Rabbi Yehuda holds that v'i Rabbi Yehuda ha'amar tzibur hu d'maaseh bezdin loy. It's the tzibur that brings. If the majority of the tzibur sins, it's the tzibur, the community, that brings the carbon, and not the bezdin. Ditnan Rabbi Yehuda imer shiva shvatim shechatu, 7 tribes that sin. Since he holds that Shevet is Ikrei Kol, is considered a congregation, Mevian Shivim Parim. Each Shevet brings a bull. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, the Sibur doesn't bring the court doesn't bring the carbon, the community brings the carbon. And therefore, since the second teaching says that the court brings it, that second teaching cannot be going according to Rabbi Yehuda. Now, Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel, instead of saying that the opinion that says that if one person follows the opinion of the court, he brings a chatis, one person follows the opinion of the court, he's exempt from bringing a chatis. It's not Rabbi Yehuda, it's Rabbi Meir. Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel, zu divrei Rabbi Meir. The Chacham say Yochid she'asa b'ras bezdin. If only an individual relies on the erroneous psak of the court, chayiv, they still have to bring a chatas. My Rabbi Meir or my Rabbanon. What's that Rabbi Meir and Rabbanon? This is new information. So says the Gemara. My Meir or my Rabbanon, the Tanya, Horu v'asu. If Bezdin makes a ruling and they do it, Rameir poiter v'chachamim mechayven. Rameir exempts and the chachamim are mechayv. Now that's a very cryptic statement. Who is potter, and who is chayiv? Now man asu. Ilema Bezdin. If it's talking about that Bezdin followed after their erroneous ruling, my time at the Rabbanan the Mechayve. What's the reason why the Rabbanan say that they're chayiv to bring a carbon? The Par Helam Davishal Tzibur is not brought if Bezdin does their erroneous decision. It's brought when the community does the erroneous decision. Vatanya Yochel Hoyra Bezdin Va'asu Bezdin. I might think that if Bezdin issues an erroneous psak and they do it, Yochel Yuhu Chayavim, I might think they have to bring the carbon. Talmud Hakol Va'asu. It's only if the community follows their erroneous psak. Ma'aseh Toli B'Kol, the action, the transgression is the community. V'horah Tuluya B'Bezdin, and the psak is issued by Bezdin. Ella, it must be Horu Bezdin, if Bezdin issued an erroneous decision, v'asu roif kol, and the majority of the kol follows. But if that's the case, then everybody holds you have to bring a parallel and dovishol tzibur. My time of the Rameir the Poiter. Ella lav, it's our case. It's our case. Horu Bezdin, if Bezdin issued the psak, v'asu miyat kol, and only the 4 cronies did it. Right? Mark, Barry, Eddie, and Marshall. And Ubahakam Ifgi. Mar Savar Yochid Sh'asa Bayraz Bezdin Potter. That if it's only a minority that does with the erroneous psak of Bezdin, that Potter, and that would be Rameir's opinion. Or Mar Savar Yochid Sh'asa Bayraz Bezdin Chayiv. So here we would have our machlokes between Rameir and Rabbana. Amar Papa, no. The Papa says, the Kuli Alma, Yochid Sh'asa Baraz Bezdin Potter. If Marshall, Bezdin paskins that this chaylev is mutter, and Marshall does it because he's relying on the psak of Bezdin, even if it's just Marshall, he's potter. Everybody holds that, because he was Tyler in the das of Bezdin. Everybody holds that. What's the machlokes between Rameir and Rabbanan? Ela Bezdin Mashlim L'Raiv Tzibur Kamifli. This is an interesting question. We said if Bezdin issues a psak and the majority of Klal Yisrael does the sin, they have to bring a Pahalim Davashel Tzibur. Over here, Bezdin ruled that this chaylev is permitted, but it's only the majority of Klal Yisrael if you count the 70 members of Bezdin that also did it. Ela Bezdin mashal meroiv tzibur kamifli. Mar savar Bezdin mashal meroiv tzibur. The Chachamim hold that Bezdin can complete the majority, and therefore they would have to bring a Pahalim Davashel Tzibur. Omar Savar, no, you need the call. You need a majority of the call, exclusive of the Bezdin. And therefore, Ein Bezdin Mashal Meroiv Tzibur, and therefore there's a p'tur from bringing the Pahalim Davashel Tzibur. That's one pshat. Biba Yazema, another pshat. Another pshat. Horu Bezdin v'asa ruba shel kol. Bezdin paskind, and the majority of the tzibur ate the chaylev that they said erroneously was permitted. Uman chachamim, and who are the chachamim? Rabbi Shimon he the amar tzibur maisi u Bezdin maisi. When the chacham say chayiv, they're saying that not only does the court bring a Pahalim Davashel Tzibur, but the community also has to bring a carbon. Rameir says the community doesn't bring the carbon, it's only the court. That's a second shot in the machlokes. A third shot in the machlokes, because Marshall likes a selection. Says the Gemara, reminds him of a smorgasbord. V'hiba yasema, Shevet she'asu b'harayos bezdinai. Here, we're talking about one tribe did it according to the psak of the tribe's bezdin. Oman chachamim, Rabbi Yehuda, it's Rabbi Yehuda, the Tanya, Shevet she'asu b'harayos bezdinai, ha-shevet chayim. The tribe has to bring a Pahalim Davashel Tzibur. The Rameir says, no, one shevet is not roiv kahal, there's no carbon. But Rabbi Yehuda holds that shevet ikrei kahal, and if a shevet follows the bezdin of their shevet, and they ate the chaylev, they have to bring a Pahalim Davashel Tzibur. V'iba yasema, the question is, do you need the majority of the census of Klal Yisrael and the majority of the Shvatim? Do you need both? V'hiba yasema k'gain shechotu shisha v'hein rubai shel kol. 6 Shvatim did the sin, but they are the majority of Klal Yisrael. Is it enough that it's the majority of Klal Yisrael, or does it also have to be the majority of the Shvatim? Oy Shiva, or 7 Shvatim, Afal Pisha Einon Ruben Shel Kol. Even though in the census it's not the majority of Klal Yisrael, but it's the majority of the Shvatim. Umasnis and Mani, and the Mishnah is, that says, the Rabbanan, who say that you're Chayiv, is Reb Shimon ben Elazar, because Reb Shimon ben Elazar says you're Chayiv whether it's the majority of the Shvatim, or it's the majority of the census of Klal Yisrael. It's enough either or. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, the Tanya, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, I remember Shmai. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says in his name, that means Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, the Shiloh of what Reb Meir holds. But Reb Shimon Elazar said in the name of Reb Meir, and that means the Chachamim over here have a different opinion than the Bryce's stated opinion of Reb Meir, that it's enough either or Chatru Shisha V'Heit Ruba Shel Kol. Even if you don't have the majority of the Shvatim, it's only 6, but it is the majority of the census of Klal Yisrael. Oy Shiva, or it's the majority of the Shvatim, Af Al Pisha Einon Ruba Shel Kol, but it's not the majority of the census. Chayavim, they're still chayav to bring a par helam davar shel tzibur. Amar Rav Asi, U'b'ha'ira. When we say that Bezdin renders an erroneous psak, and the majority of Klal Yisrael follows that psak, you don't need the majority of Klal Yisrael world over. You only need the majority of Klal Yisrael in Eretz Yisrael. U'ba'ira halach acha roiv yoshvei Eretz Yisrael. You go after the majority of the inhabitants, the Jews in Eretz Yisrael. Shenema vayash leima ba'esahi asachag. Shlomo HaMelech made a big celebration to celebrate the Chanukas Habayis, the building of the temple. V'kol Yisrael imai, and all of Klal Yisrael was with him. Kol, a congregation, Milavoi Hamas ad Nachal Mitzrayim, from the approach of Hamas until the river of Mitzrayim. That means in Eretz Yisrael, L'fnei Hashem Elokeinu, and they celebrated Shivas Yomim, V'Shivas Yomim, 7 days plus 7 days. It means that they celebrated even on Yom Kippur. That year they didn't fast Yom Kippur. Arba Asar Yom. Now, Michdei Ksiv V'chol Yisrael Imoi Kohol Gadol, all of Klal Yisrael with him, a large congregation. Why does it have to say Milavo Chamos Ad Nachal Mitzrayim Lamali? Shmami No Hane Yudei Krei Kol. Only those that are in the borders of Eretz Yisrael are called Kol. Aval Hanach Lo Yikrei Kol. But Jews that live in the diaspora are not considered Kol. Now, Pshita, Merubin, when Bezdin issued the erroneous psak, and Klal Yisrael ate the chaylev, they were the majority. But then v'nismatu, then there was a population explosion, and when it came the time to bring the carbon, they weren't the majority anymore. Does Bezdin bring the carbon? Hainu plukta de Rabbi Shimon v'Rabbanan. That's a machlokes, Rabbi Shimon and Rabbanan. This machlokes, which the Gemara chooses not even to tell us, we have to look it up. This machlokes is said later on, all the way at the end of the Mishnah. There's a special offering brought by the Kohen Gadol or the Nasi. If the Kohen Mashiach does a sin, he has to bring a bull. The Nasi has to bring a he-goat. A regular person that sins has to bring a female sheep or a female goat. So what happened over here is where a regular person did a sin. The regular person did a sin. Before he got to bring the carbon, he was elevated to a Nasi or a Kohen Mashiach. And the question is, what do we do? So the Rabbanan say that he brings a regular carbon. He brings a regular female sheep or female goat, because when we go basa when he did the sin. And since when he did the sin, he was a regular person, he brings a regular carbon. Reb Shimon is of the opinion that if the sin was known to him before he became a Kohen Gadol or a Nasi, he brings an ordinary carbon. But if the sin became known to him afterwards, he's exempt from bringing a chatas. He doesn't bring a regular chatas because now he's a Kohen Gadol or a Nasi. He doesn't bring the special carbon because when he sinned, he wasn't a Kohen Gadol or a Nasi. So therefore, it's obvious that Berubim v'nismatu, if Klal Yisrael, when they did the sin, they were the majority, but later on they diminished. Hainu plukta the Reb Shimon Rabbanan. According to the Rabbanan, we go bust at the time of the sin, and the time of the sin, they were the majority, and therefore Beis Din has to bring a parallel and Dov Shel Tzibur. According to Reb Shimon, we go basser when it became known, and now when it became known it's a miyat, they wouldn't bring the carbon. But now the question is, mu'otin v'nisrabu mai. What happens if when they sinned, they weren't enough? In other words, Beis Din makes an erroneous decision, and they sinned. At the time of the sin, there weren't enough. Then, when it became known, they have the majority. Mai. So according to the Rabbanan, it's obvious that they wouldn't bring a carbon because they go bust at the time of the sin. At the time of the Psak of Beis Din, it wasn't the majority of Klal Yisrael. So you wouldn't bring a carbon. The shaila is, according to Reb Shimon, when it became known, when it became known, now there is a majority. So what would be the din? Do we say Reb Shimon the asal basi yediyah? Reb Shimon that goes according to the time when it was known, mechayim. He would hold that therefore Beis Din has to bring a param Dov Shel Tzibur, because when it became known that they made a mistake, the ones that did it are the majority. Rabbanan asal basi chatas, and Rabbanan that say we go basi at the time when they did the sin, then they were in the majority patre. Oiloi, or perhaps not. Mai. Now, says the Gemara, it's not a good comparison to Reb Shimon. V'tizbra ema d'shamat leidu Reb Shimon da'amar da'azal af basa yediyah. You go also after the time where it became known. So, in the case of the Kohen Gadol and the Nasi, so there at the time of the sin, the person sinned, and now when it becomes known, they were both done at a time of chiyuv. Therefore, he sinned when he was a common person, and now when it became known to him, it's also a sin. But here, when Beis Din issued the erroneous decision, there wasn't a majority of Klal Yisrael, so there wasn't any sin that makes them culpable to a parallel Dov Shel Tzibur. Over here, where Yediyah, they came aware the loichata of something that wasn't a sin originally, because it wasn't the majority of Klal Yisrael, mishametlei. Because it can't be that Reb Shimon goes only basa the Yediyah. Because if Shimon goes only basa the Yediyah, so now when it became known he's a Kohen Mashiach or a Nasi, he should have to bring a par or a sar respectively. K'dim kein laisi ki hashta. El Reb Shimon chatov Yediyah by. He needs both the sin and the awareness. And since the sin was when he was a commoner, and the awareness was when he was a Nasi or a Kohen Mashiach, he doesn't bring any carbon. So here, since at the time that the sin happened, you didn't have a majority of Klal Yisrael, even Reb Shimon would agree that he's exempt from a carbon. Now, I should begin to greet all these wonderful people: Dr. Guy, Irving Fishbaum, Nachman Mansky, Nachman Chapler, Saba, Yitzi Fuchs, Yaakov Warman, Ruvain Pollack, Mel Zachter, Dr. Block, A.B. Spry, Shimon Klein, Eddie Chazan, Shalom Fogel, Marshall Castle, Rabbi Kranz, Itchy, Dr. Eisenberg, Avigdor, Moshe Lehman, Stephen Holtzman, Yitzi Muller, Danny Vogel, Avram Rezepkowitz, Ilya Shutman, Abe Arbach, Yeshua Shmuel Eisenberg, Richard Rosenzweig, and Eddie Chazan. Here in Shul, we have Barish Gesserim, Chaim Kramer, Chol Avram Chavin, Ruvain Shannon, and Reb Halpert. A total of 35 Zoomers, so we are getting there.
What does it mean when it says it's miyat? Does that mean when they gave the psak, that means miyat did the avera? Or does it mean miyat kali so what?
It means that a lot of people died. So now it's only a miyat of Klal Yisrael.
Nothing to do with them doing the avera?
No. Now, Ibayalahu. Horu Bezdin Chaylev is mutter. Bezdin issues a psak that this species of Chaylev is mutter. V'asu miyat akol. And a miyat of the congregation did it. V'chazu Bezdin behem. Then Chazan said, oops, we made a mistake. Then they said, no, we didn't make a mistake. So they paskened again that the chaylev is mutter, and then another miyat did it. Now, if you put the two miyutim together, you have a majority. Now, Kevin the shtei yediyas, since it's in two separate state of awarenesses, loy mitzdarf, they can't combine. Kevin the aidi v'aidi chaylevu, since it's the same sin, mitzdarif, the two miyats could combine, and Bezdin has to bring a parallel davar shel tzibur. Now, v'im tim tzalaim kevin aidi v'aidi chaylev u'mitzdarif, since they're both chaylev, it combines. Miyat b'chaylev shal gabe keva. The first psak was about the chaylev on top of the moor. Or miyat b'chaylev shal gabe dakin. The second psak was a chaylev on top of the small intestines. Can they combine? Mao, hachavad came to betray Kroi Kaasi, since they're learned out from two different psukim. Like mitzdarf. Oidilma came to Heidi V'Heidi Chaylevu, they both have the name Chaylev, it could combine. Mitzdarf. V'im tim tzalaim Hashem Chaylevu mitzdarf, they're both called Chaylev and they combine. Miyat b'Chaylev and miyat b'dam, maho. What about if first they paskened Chaylev and a miyat did it, and then they paskened dam and a miyat did it? Hachavadi Kevin the Trey Yisurein, since they're two different names, Loi Mitzdarf, they don't combine. Oy Dilma, Kevin the carbon shava, they bring the same carbon. For Chaylev and Dam, it's the same carbon of a Chatas Mitzdarf. Now, Im Timel and Sim Salayim, that's enough that they should combine. Kevin the carbon shava Mitzdarf. What about Miyat B'Chaylev or Miyat B'Avodis Kachavimau? First, they rendered this erroneous decision about Chaylev, and then they rendered an erroneous decision about Avodah Zarah. Now, there's two different korbanos. For Chaylev, they bring either a female goat or a female sheep. For Avodah Zarah, it's only a female goat. Hachavadai ein Yisurin Shava, ve'ein Karbanan Shava. They're not the same. Oidilma came into Aidi V'Aidi Karisu. They're both a penalty of Karis Mitzdarif. So take her Tishbi Yatar, it's Kushas V'Bayis. Now,
Perfect answer for that piece.
it's kind of very appropriate that we should learn extra words. We need extra schusin. I'm going to say later on that, who says it? It's really an interesting thing. The Masika Ar, Rav Shlomo Levenstein, the one who did the Chak in Hebrew for the Mifal, who did it a lot faster than I'm doing it. He's a lot smarter than me. So The Masika Ar says, in his time, there was 7.5 billion people in the world. And he said there's about 1 million people learning Torah. So it says, if not for the Torah, the world wouldn't exist. So he says, every person that learns is upholding 7,500 people. There's 1 million people learning, and 7.5 billion people on earth. So every person that learns is upholding 75, and even Marshall is upholding 7,500 people. That's a big schus. Every word that we do, we're upholding 7,500 people.
Wow, never thought of it that way.
It's really amazing, really amazing.
Need a back brace.
I could hear 7,500 people saying, could you give me somebody else besides Marshall? But okay, what can you do?
I'll take a double load.
Actually, they're quite grateful.
Yeah. Anyway. Ibayalahu. Horu bezdin shechelev mutter. Beskin paskin that this species of chelev is permitted. V'asum miyad hakol. And a minority of the kol did the sin. And then umeis oisa bezdin. Then that bezdin died. V'amad bezdin achar v'chazu v'haru. And then another bezdin also judged it, and they also paskin that this species of chelev is mutter. And then v'asum miyad achar. And then another miyad ate the chelev, and then they realized they made a mistake. So according to the simple opinion that Bezdin has to bring the carbon, well, obviously, like Tibaylach, because the original Bezdin that issued the psak is not alive anymore. Halesnu. Elaki Tibaylach aliba demanda amar tzibur maisi, that the community has to bring it. And now you have a majority of the community. Mai. Tzibur hakai. The two miyutim that did it are here. We need also the awareness of the Bezdin that issued the original psak, and they're not around, so that they should be able to bring the parhelim davishal tzibur, teku tishbi yataretz kushes vibayis. Now, here we're going to learn that in order for there to be a parhelim davishal tzibur, it has to be a unanimous psak of the court. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Meya sheyashvu l'hayrais. Now, normally, the Sanhedrin Hagadol is only 70, and you can't have more. But this was a special Horayos. Sometimes they have a special Horayos. If 100 sat to judge on a case, Ein chayovin, there's not going to be a parhelim davishal tzibur ad sheyoru kulan, unless it was a unanimous decision. Shenemar v'im kol adas Yisrael yishku, if the entire assemblage errs. Now adas over here means the court, and it says kol adas ad sheyishku kulan, meaning ad shetivshay dara b'chol adas Yisrael. The psak has to spread through all of Klali, all of the court. Amar Rav Huna b'rei Rav Oishia, hachinami mistavra, the kol ha'Torah kula kaimelon ruba kekulai. Normally we say ruba kekula, like for example by shchita. It's enough if you shech the majority of the food pipe and the majority of the windpipe. But v'hachak siv kol, here it says all. Kol adas. And therefore, since it insists on kol, hol v'kach, afilu ein meya, even if it's 100, you need every one. Tanan, we learned, here we're going to have a difficulty. So it's a difficulty. Tanan, Horu Bezdin. If Bezdin issues an erroneous psak, v'yoda echad mehem sheto, and one of them realizes that they made a mistake, or Talmud v'roi lahira, or a disciple that was fit for Hira, v'holach v'asa al piem, and he went and did according to their psak, Kevin she'asu v'asa imam, since they did it and he did it with them, v'bein she'asu v'asa imam, whether they did it and he did it with them, v'bein she'asu v'asa achrayim, or they did it and he did it after them, v'bein she'asu v'asa, or whether they didn't do it and he did it, harizeh chayiv. He is chayiv to bring a carbon, because as we said, he didn't rely on their psak. He knew it was wrong. He only did it because it was a mitzvah l'shmaya, because he didn't depend on Bezdin. Says the Gemara, hayu dechayiv. Only he is chayiv. Ha'achar potter. But if somebody else would rely on them, they're potter. Says the Gemara, but why? It wasn't a unanimous decision, because since this one judge did it, so obviously it wasn't a unanimous decision. So you see, it doesn't have to be everybody's decision. Says the Gemara, no. Here, that judge, that he himself ate the chaylev, that judge that he himself ate the chaylev, even though he knew that it was wrong, he nodded his head because he felt it was a mitzvah to follow the majority. He nodded his head. So it wasn't a majority decision. It was a unanimous decision. Tajma, Hayru Bezdin, V'yode echad mehem shito, and one of them knew that it was an error. V'amal lahen, and he said to them, Hari elu p'turim, V'amal lahen toyanatem, and he said to them, you're making a mistake. Hari elu p'turim. Now that implies only because he told them you're making a mistake. If he was silent, they would be chayiv. But if he was silent, chayav. But wait a second. Even if he was silent, it wasn't an anonymous decision of the court. But it wasn't a unanimous decision. The implication is, if he didn't tell them you're making an error, he also nodded his head. The Rishonim asked, so then why doesn't it say a bigger chiddush that he just that it wouldn't be chayiv if he just kept quiet? That's a kasha. Amrei, it says the Gemara, Masiv Rabbi Shashia, Samchu Rabbi Seinu al Divrei Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Our rabbis relied on the psak of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Val Divrei Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Tzadok. There are things that we didn't make a decree. Really, they should have made it that after the Churban you shouldn't drink meat and you shouldn't have wine. In mourning for the fact that we don't have the meat of kachim and we don't have wine of libations. But to do that would be a gezeira she'enat tzibur yochel lamed by, that the majority of the tzibur wouldn't be able to withstand. And samchu Rabbi Seinu al divrei Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, al divrei Rabbi Lazar Rab Tzadok, she'a'imrim ein geizim gezeira ala tzibur eli imkein roivat tzibur yochel lamed ba. Unless the majority of the tzibur could withstand it. Now notice it doesn't say all of the tzibur, it says the majority of the tzibur. Now how do we know that it has to be something that the majority of the tzibur could handle? Because it says During the time of Nehemiah, Klal Yisrael accepted upon themselves a curse if they didn't bring Meiser, if they didn't bring Truma. V'ma'era atem ne'orim, you are cursed because v'oisi atem koivim, you steal from me by not bringing the Meiser and the Truma. Hagoy kulay, the entire nation. Now, why does it say Hagoy kulay? Because the entire nation accepted this upon themselves. Now, even though it says entire nation, we say that it's enough a majority. If a majority could handle it. So here also when it says kol hadas, it doesn't have to be everybody. It's enough a majority. So tiyufta, the Rabbi Yonason, tiyufta. So why does it say ve'alamai kol hadas the kamer rachmana? Why does it say kol hadas? That's to tell you that the issuance of the court needs that the full court has to be in session. You don't need the entire court to render a decision. It's enough a majority. But you need the full court to be in session. The quorum is 70. Hachikamer. I'ika kulam hav yahira. V'ilai, if not, lo hav yahira. Amar Rabbi Yeshua. Asara sheyoshvim badin, 10 judges that sit in judgment. Koiler talui b'tzaver kulam. The iron collar is around all their necks. In other words, every member shares in the responsibility of not making a wrong psak. Says Gemara Pshita. If you're a member of the court, you're responsible. Says Gemara Kamash Melanda Alfilu Talmud Bifnei Rabbi. Even if it's a disciple sitting before his Rebbe, and maybe he's cowed to argue with his Rebbe. No, if he's sitting on the court, he shares the responsibility. And to show how seriously our poskim took the punishment of somebody that issues a wrong psak, Rav Huna ki avinofik lebeidina maisi asora tanoi debei rav lekamei. He would bring 10 of the chachamim of the yeshiva to join him. Why? Because then the punishment is shared. Kiechi denimti and shiva bikshura. Each one will take a splinter from the beam. In other words, it'll lessen the liability of each of the judges. And similarly, Rav Ashi Kavi Maisa Treifta Lekamei, when they brought a questionable treifa before him to know if it was a flaw that rendered the animal also because it has a fatal flaw. Maisi Asara Taboche Mimasa Mechasi, he brought 10 expert butchers from Masa Mechasi, Umoisiv Kamei, that they should all join him in inspecting the animal. Amar Kihechi Denimtion Shiva Mikshura, each one will take a splinter from the beam. It will lessen the liability. Now, sorry, it's taking a little longer, the learning. It's a it's a lot to say. Horu Bezdin, we're going to be finished this Masechta in another 9 days. So it's not going to be a long time. Zvachim will be a sigh of relief after that. Horu Bezdin issued a psak that the chaylev is mutter. V'yodu sheto, and they realized they made a mistake. V'chazu behem, and they reversed their decision. Bein sheviu kaparasan, whether they brought their paralim davishal tzibur already. Bein shelo yeviu kaparasan, or they didn't bring it. V'holach v'osa al piem, Abi went and ate the chaylev because he didn't know they reversed the decision. He didn't know it. He wasn't aware that they reversed their decision. So, Reb Shimon paiter. Reb Shimon says he's pater because he relied on the decision of the court. Reb Elazar I misafik. Reb Elazar says we're not sure. Maybe he should have found out. And since we're not sure, he brings a parhelim davar. He brings an ashim tali. In the case where we're not sure if he's chayiv achatas or not, he brings an ashim tali. Ezo safik. So it says, well, it depends. Yashiv lei b'seich beisai chayiv. If he's sitting in his house, he has to bring ashim tali because maybe he should have known that Bezdin reversed it. Halach loy l'medina say, yeah, but if he went to Australia, so there's no way for him to know pater. And indeed, Amar Rabbi Akiva, moidani bezeh, in a case where he went overseas, shu karv l'ptur min ha'chayva, that he's closer to being pater than being liable. Amalei Ben Azai, so Ben Azai wanted clarification. Ben Azai used to be Rabbi Akiva's son-in-law. Amalei Ben Azai, some say that his marriage was annulled because he couldn't consummate his marriage. It says, Ein kishui el ladas. The aver could only become erect with concentration. And he simply wasn't capable to take his mind off Torah. So he wasn't able to be married. So Amalei Ben Azai, so what's the difference between Abi being in Australia and Abi being in the house? In the house he also didn't know. So Rabbi Akiva said, it's a little bit of a liability, a little bit of his chayvus to know what's going on. But if he's in Australia, he couldn't have found out. They didn't have internet. Now here we learn that Bezdin only brings a parhelim davar shel tzibur if they uprooted a detail of a law. But if they uproot the whole law, they don't bring a parhelim davar shel tzibur. Horu Bezdin lakor es kol haguf. If Bezdin uproots the whole Isser of Shabbos, the whole Isser of Avodah Zarah, Amru ain't nida b'Torah. There's no Isser nida. Ain't Shabbos b'Torah. Or ain't Avodah Kechavim b'Torah. Hariel P'turim. There's no Parhelim davar shel tzibur in that case. Horu levatel mixes or the kaya mixes. If they issue a psak to be mevatel some of it, but not all of it. Harielu chayam. For example, Ketzad. Amru yesh nida b'Torah. Of course, if a woman is a menstruant, she's a nida. But there's a halacha during the 11 days after her nidus is finished. If she bleeds, then the next day she is a shemeris yaim keneged yaim and can't be with her husband until she's taivel and doesn't see blood that day. They said that doesn't apply. Yesh nida b'Torah, aval abal shemeris yom keneged yom pater. During the 11 days, she's allowed to sleep with her husband if she sees blood the next day. Or yesh Shabbos b'Torah. There is Shabbos, and you're not allowed to cook, and you're not allowed to sew, and you're not allowed to write. You could carry from a private domain to a public domain. They take out a detail. Or you can't worship, you can't sacrifice, you can't offer a libation. But if you bow down, it's potter. So they removed one detail. If it became unknown to them, one davar v'loy kol haguf, but not the entire mitzvah. Amar Reb Yehuda Amar Rav, my time at Reb Shimon. What's the reason that Reb Shimon says that if Abi didn't know that Bezdin reversed, he's potter. Because he still thought he was doing it with the permission of the court. Ikid Amrei, Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, Omer Hayu Reb Shimon, Kol hara sheyatzu b'roiv hatzibur, any psak that spread through the majority of the community, Yochid ha'oisa potter. An individual who does it is potter, even if Bezdin reversed himself. The ruling was given to differentiate between an error and a willful act. And here it was obviously he did it in error because he still thought Bezdin he didn't know that they reversed their decision. Meisvei, Paralel Davashil Tzibur Usirei Avodas Kachavim, the par brought by Bezdin and the Seirei Avodas Kachavim brought in the event that there was a erroneous decision by the court about Avodah Zarah, Betchila Goyven Alein, they would make an initial collection to pay for that carbon. Divrei Reb Shimon. That's the opinion of Reb Shimon. Reb Yehuda says no. Mitrumas Alishka Hein Ban. It came from the shkolim that was collected for Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and they took it out from the shofaros. They took it out from the communal shkolim. So, according to Reb Shimon, they made a public collection. And if they made a public collection, how could it be that AB doesn't know that they reversed their decision? Amai, why should AB be potter? Kavan de Gavalu, since they made a collection, so then that means that Bezdin reversed their decision. They're making a collection for the power Helam Davashil Tzibur. Havalei Hoda. So the Gemara says simple. Iba Yisema Kigain Shigavu Stam, where they made the collection and they didn't say what they were collecting for. V'iba Yisema Kigain Dolei Havalei B'mas. On the day that they made the collection, Abi wasn't around. V'iba Yisema Rav Ki'idach Tanasavar, that Reb Shimon is the one that says they took it from the Trumas Alishka. The Tana Ipcha, Batchila Goyven Lam, they made a new collection. Divrei Reb Yehuda, Reb Shimon, I remember Trumas Alishka came on. It came from the already collected shkolim, and therefore, since it came from the already collected shkolim, there was no collection that would have clued off Abi that there was already a reversal of the decision, so he didn't know it, and that's why he's potter. Boy, every daf over here is a real accomplishment. I want to thank you all for joining us. Remember, Motzi Shabbos, what time is daf? Yaakov? 10 o'clock, getting earlier, Rabbi, so you won't know what to do.